Good evening, and welcome to TARTA's Community Forum. I'm Laura Kaprowski, Chief Communications and Customer Experience Officer at TARTA. Tonight is a special event that we are hosting during Ohio Loves Transit Week that takes place from February 7th through February 14th. This is an opportunity for us to recognize the important role that public transit plays in our community and all across the state of Ohio. To put this in perspective as to what public transit means to Ohio's residents, businesses, and future, a couple of important and interesting facts. Did you know there are 68 urban and rural transit systems in Ohio serving 70 counties? Annually, before COVID, transit systems in Ohio were providing over 100 million trips per year. And of those trips, there are nearly 15 million trips per year that Ohio transit systems provide for seniors and people with disabilities. Just from these figures alone, it underscores the importance and necessity of public transit to be a well-funded part of our overall state transportation system. This evening, we have a great program for you. First, you will hear some TARTA updates and news from TARTA CEO Kimberly Dunham. There has been a lot that occurred last year and more to come in 2021. We are also doing something new for TARTA with this program, which is to bring in a national keynote speaker for our community to learn from the best as to what makes a high-performing, innovative transit system. And we are excited and honored that Mark Aesch is joining us this evening. After Mark's keynote address, there will be an opportunity to ask Mark questions about his presentation, and this will be moderated by our CEO, Kimberly Dunham. Attendees will be able to provide their questions in the Q&A box at that time. Our final presentation for this evening will be a preview of TARTA's spring schedule changes for our fixed route bus system. Peter Voorhees, who is a transit planning manager with AECom and is leading this project for TARTA, will provide this presentation. We have a full evening, lots of great speakers and information. So at this time, let's get going with the program. I would like to introduce TARTA CEO Kimberly Dunham.
Thank you, Laura. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight as we celebrate Ohio Loves Transit Week. I'd like to welcome all of you, and I'm eager to share with you our accomplishments over the past year, the urgent need for additional funding on the local, state, and national level, as well as our strategy to advocate for more funding here in Ohio. There were several priority items I stated I would focus on during my first year here. These included stabilize the situation at TARTA, gain local and national recognition for transformational change at our agency, build a new executive team, develop a strategic plan, look internally to find business process improvements, begin the system redesign public outreach process, create a culture of diversity and inclusion, focus on service standards of excellence in all that we do, and secure adequate long-term funding for our agency. We've made significant progress in most of these areas, but there's certainly much more work ahead for us. Public transit is interwoven into the fabric of a community, serves as an economic driver, opens doors of opportunity, and literally changes people's lives. A public transit system can thrive only when adequate resources are provided to cover operating costs and ensure continued investment in vehicles, facilities, equipment, and emerging technologies. Even a well-funded transit system faces challenges, trying to balance between increasing ridership, covering a broad geographic area, and at the same time meeting employer needs for highly qualified workers. But it's so much more than that. Transit systems also serve as a community partner, and TARTA has done just that this past year. We've undertaken many new initiatives, including Voter Ready for TARTA, expanded service to the Amazon Fulfillment Center in Rossford, and the Toledo Zoo and Aquarium, and partnering on U.S. Census activity and human trafficking prevention. We're now preparing to coordinate expanded service to V Project vaccination locations, part of a local coalition that is gaining national recognition. TARTA has also served as a co-sponsor of the Metro Parks Glass City Riverwalk Build Grant and the Lucas County Metropolitan Housing Authority HUD Completes Neighborhoods Grant. More than $24 million in federal funding was awarded to these two projects, and we look forward to working together to provide additional transit service to these areas. And of course, we cannot forget the vital services we've continued to provide during the entire COVID pandemic, not stopping service even once. As we all know, TARTA had undergone nearly a decade of organizational neglect. Our business model needs significant improvement, and our team of transit professionals should be given the tools and resources required to run a high-performing and efficient transit system. The entire premise behind Ohio Loves Transit Week is to promote a focus on long-term, sustainable investment for public transit. We are part of a statewide network of transit providers that Laura earlier referred to. Ohio significantly lags behind most other states in terms of state investment in public transit. As part of a truly multimodal transportation strategy on the national, state, and local level, public transit should be prioritized and adequately funded along with roads, bridges, passenger and freight rail, bicycle, pedestrian, air, and ports. We are really fortunate to have such a progressive partner in TMACOG, with a leadership team that understands the importance of multimodal transportation planning here in our region. We have meetings scheduled this week with Ohio state legislators to stress the importance of increased state-level support of our public transit agencies. We will also be talking about the local funding issue that TARTA faces, and we'll be asking for their support in advancing legislative language that will move us forward. As always, above all, we value our customers, our staff, and external partners, and appreciate all you do to ensure TARTA's success, including your efforts to promote additional funding of our vital community service. Thank you again for joining us this evening, and I would now like to introduce Mark Aesch, a highly respected national public transit expert, industry thought leader, best-selling author of the book Driving Excellence, and CEO of TransPro Consulting. Mark previously served as the Chief Executive Officer at the Rochester Genesee Regional Transportation Authority in New York. During his tenure, he gained national attention by turning the transit system's budget deficits into surpluses, lowered fares, implemented new performance standards, and increased ridership. TransPro is currently working with TARTA on our strategic plan and performance-based scorecard to be adopted by the TARTA board in March. We're very fortunate to have him with us this evening, and with that, I'd like to welcome Mark and turn it over to him.
Super. Thanks so much, Kim. Just want to make sure that everyone can hear audio. So if we can just have a confirmation before I speak into a quiet vortex. Everyone picking up audio okay?
Yes.
Good, Mark.
Beautiful. Well, thanks for having me, Kim, and just real kudos certainly to you and to Laura and the entire team. The fact that you have assembled, such a terrific group that is passionate about the work that you lead the agency for, and certainly the value that you bring to the Toledo community, but also to the industry in total across the entire country is incredibly valuable and a wonderful asset that Toledo has been able to have you at the helm of the agency, particularly through the challenges of the course of the past year. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to sharing much of the work that we have done over a number of years. I had the chance, as Kim was suggesting, to be a transit CEO for a number of years and share maybe a few war stories of that as well. We're relatively new members of the Ohio Public Transportation Association and honored to be supporters based on the work that we have been doing with TARTA and others in Ohio, and also eager to share some of the work that we have done nationally. And really some examples that I am hopeful will be of value to the entire team as you listen this evening. So let me give you a little bit of background on Transpro as we kick in. We are a national public sector management consulting firm. We do substantial work, as you might expect, in the transportation space. But we also have the privilege to work with a number of school districts nationally, as well as state and local governments. And I'm going to share some examples of that. And I think what we have discovered in our years leading a public transportation system and now celebrating 10 years working with transit systems across the United States, that there are so many systems that are replicable across public sector organizations. Whether it's public transit or a public library, the reality is many of the principles of delivering high quality public experiences are able to be replicated. So you can see on this slide a number of different states, a number of different organizations, from the New York Cities and the Los Angeleses and the Bostons of the world to the much smaller agencies. It's recognizing build similar systems, and it allows you to deliver such great value to your employees, to your customers, and also to the taxpayers who are investors in making all of this go. Speaking of investors, I want to share with you a story out of Austin, Texas. And it's a story of an organization, much like Kim was suggesting in Toledo, that we have been working with for a period of time. These things don't magically appear over the course of a period of time. We've had the pleasure of working with a team in Austin for several years now. For those that are experienced in performance measurement, there is a term that's used in both the private sector and the public sector known as the Net Promoter Score. It was built out of Harvard Business School years ago, and the simplicity of the model is such that you ask customers a single question. How much on a scale of 1 to 10 would you recommend this service to a product, this service to a friend or a family member? It's a question that we've all had a number of times, whether you go to a restaurant or a number of different experiences that you have. 9s and 10s are promoters, 7s and 8s are passive, and 0 to 6 are detractors. Typically, if you're an Apple or you are Disney, your Net Promoter Score is in the 60s, maybe even the 70s. If you're a cable television company, your Net Promoter Score is red. People despise the work that you do. And so I share all of that. The Net Promoter Score in Austin, the value that people saw was a 59, really high. It shouldn't be lost upon us if I share this slide with you that over a period of time, the voters supported the agency to do even more than what they had originally signed. And this past November, the voters invested in the Austin transit system with even additional dollars because they were able to see that value. Now, I shared with you that I used to be a transit CEO, and I can tell you our Net Promoter Score was not a 59. I was a young CEO at a mid-sized transit organization in Rochester, New York. And the headlines here sort of give you a sense of what it was we were dealing with. We were spending 40% more money than we took in every year. It doesn't take a business person to figure out not exactly a recipe for sustainability, longevity, or whatever the phrase is you might want to put to that. We had, if that wasn't bad enough, $1 million stolen from the agency in a coin counting scandal. Our on-time performance was actually worse than the airlines. And so if you've got a huge financial problem, what do you ask the community to do? Pay more money, raise fares on folks. So the agency was considering raising fares, slashing service. As you might expect, we had a very militant relationship with our public employee bargaining unit. We couldn't come to agreement on anything, and they were struggling at one point to even figure out how to cover paychecks. Not exactly a recipe for success, not the foundation that leads to the Austin headlines, which I was just sharing with you. So we began at the basics, and I began as CEO to play a clip from President Kennedy, which many of you will recognize, and I'm going to play for you this evening. I would urge you to focus on the president's words where he so clearly articulates the success of the vision that he looks to create. Look how there's only one way to define what President Kennedy wants to achieve. And it's sounding like we're not picking the audio up from this. Looking like it's not connecting for us. So in any case, what the president says, I can almost repeat it because I've listened to it 500 times now. What President Kennedy says with passion is that we will send a man to the moon and back safely by the end of the decade. There's only one way to define the success that the president articulated. One man to the moon and back safely by the end of the decade. And the president goes on to say it's time that we take our long-range goals and act with urgency to be able to achieve them. It's time that we spend our budget to deliver upon that success in the way that we've defined it. Budget doing purposeful work in order to deliver success that's so critical for what it is that we're trying to be able to achieve. So we took the principles of President Kennedy and we brought it back to our organization. I shared with you the foundation of troubles that we were facing, and we articulated success for ourselves. We had 725 employees. We were going to figure out how to feed 725 families. We were not going to lay a single person off who showed up with spirit to deliver value to our customers in our community. There was no way we were going to raise fares on people when we couldn't deliver even quality service to them. We were going to ensure that we looked after ourselves before we asked our customers to pay more for a low quality experience. And we were going to build ourselves the best damn bus company in the United States. We were going to feed the families, look after our customers, and build ourselves a world-class organization. So with a clear definition of success in place, one of the things that we have discovered in our work from transit agencies from the Tampas in Florida to the Charlottes in North Carolina and the Sacramentos in California, it's recognizing that there's really three key elements of excellence. The first is thinking about organizational excellence. How do you align your organization to deliver great value? The second is thinking about operational excellence. It's terrific that organizationally we're aligned to deliver great value. Now we have to execute. Simply getting Tom Brady onto your team isn't enough. You actually have to call the right plays and execute with professionalism to be able to cause something magical to be able to occur. And then finally, it's investment. With the right organization, structured the right way, clarity of success, operational excellence, as NASA might say for President Kennedy, it then will inspire the investment that's necessary to deliver that great value. Let me get a sense of what that looks like. So as you think about organizational excellence, there's really three key components of this. The first, thinking about that clarity of purpose, the clarity of outcomes, a clear, prioritized measurement system. Not all measurements are created equally. And purposeful work. How do we do work that will actually produce the outcomes we care about rather than simply work to keep us busy? As we think about operational excellence, three key components here. The first is doing what you intend to do and doing it with brilliance. Be purposeful in our work and do it with intentionality and a clear commitment to high performance. An engaged workforce that understands exactly how their work brings value. And then customers who embrace your commitment to excellence. It's one thing to deliver great service. It's quite another to have highly satisfied customers, working to ensure that the customers embrace the great work that we deliver to them. And finally, it's thinking about investment. How do we put ourselves in a position that the agency is able to communicate how it brings value and the community recognizes that value. You put the two of those together, the agency able to communicate its excellence, combine it with the community recognizing that value. Now you've got voters in a position where they're willing to open their pocketbooks to us. Putting the two together are key. Organizational excellence, operational excellence, and investment excellence are a recipe for great things to happen. So let's dig into those a little bit. As you think about organizational excellence, so many organizations are focused on what we describe as eating tomato soup with a fork. There's a lot of activity in place, but it's not necessarily to produce the outcome of getting tomato soup into our belly. How do we think about getting the board and the management team to be aligned around producing the results that we care about, the outcomes that are so critical for us? It's not simply good enough to run fast on the football field. We have to know where the end zone is. There has to be clear articulation of that place of success. How do we do results-based work? TARTA has actually gone through that process. So Kim very kindly was sharing the strategic work that she has led the management team at TARTA through, as well as the board. And so they have aligned around a series of outcomes here, and you can see them in front of you as TARTA has thought about their customer experience. Now, TARTA has not historically measured the Net Promoter Score, but they're about to start. And their commitment, their definition of man to the moon and back safely by the end of the decade is an improvement over the baseline. They're going to get even better. They're going to ensure, I talked a moment ago about ensuring that they can communicate value. TARTA is committed to improving that value, making sure that residents say, yes, I hear you, you're bringing me value, and I recognize you for it. I applaud you for the fact that you've brought me value. Financially, the agency has defined success both on the operating side and on the capital side. And of course, an invested workforce, a group of employees who are committed to that culture of ownership, ensuring that they bring great value to the taxpayers who pay the bills and the customers who take advantage of the service that they deliver. TARTA is embracing this organizational excellence. So as we think about operational excellence, with clear outcomes in place, operational excellence is thinking about acting with intentionality, doing it with absolute brilliance. I was going to play a clip for you this evening. We're clearly having some audio struggles, but there's a wonderful clip from the movie Up. For those that have kids at home, you'll certainly recognize this. And it's where the dog is giving the magical power to be able to speak. And the master provides the dog with a collar that allows him to be able to talk. And the dog is thanking the master for the ability to be able to speak and the fact that he's so joy-filled. And a squirrel walks by and the dog suddenly whirls and yells, "Squirrel!" Operational excellence comes from the ability to stay focused on the organizational excellence. We can't be great at all things. And so it's the recognition, how do we be great on the topics that are the outcomes we've committed to? It's that clarity of delivering the outcomes which are so critical to our success. So I won't take you through the dog video as much as it is. Later in the evening, you can all Google dog in the movie Up and you'll get a sense of the squirrel video. If you've got kids, you've certainly seen the video. But the point is that criticality of staying focused on your organizational excellence as you begin to operate. TARTA is doing that. So we were able to work with TARTA this past year, and Kim and Laura, as Chief Customer Officer, have been focused on their Net Promoter Score. Pre-COVID, they were able to see what their fixed route bus Net Promoter Score was, and I'm going to share with you in a second, it's actually higher than the industry average. They're bringing value and able to communicate that. They have absolute clarity of the issues that are most important to the customers to drive their satisfaction level. On-time performance, and route coverage. That allows the management team to focus on the factors that will drive customer experience rather than get distracted chasing squirrels on topics that are less important to the customers. Work on on-time performance, work on route coverage, and you're going to bring hearts and minds of the customers along with you. Absolutely essential for creating that. In fact, President Kennedy was able to recognize the importance of this culture of ownership. He was taking a tour of NASA soon after he had given the speech, and he came across the custodian, and the president went up to the man that was the custodian and said, "What do you do here?" And the custodian turned to the president and said, "Mr. President, I'm sending a man to the moon." It's that clarity of ownership which is so critical. Leslie, if you can take us back a slide, I want to share with folks how the team at TARTA has really focused on the right metrics, operational excellence, to produce the organizational excellence which they've aligned with their board around. So I teased earlier this concept of the Net Promoter Score. And you can see here the percentage of promoters on a scale of 1 to 10 are 9s and 10s, was 66% minus a relatively modest number of detractors, 0s through 6s. The Net Promoter Score is the percentage of our promoters minus the percentage of our detractors. That gives us a Net Promoter Score of 50. Compare that to an industry norm of 28. It gives us clear recognition of the opportunity to be able to communicate to our workforce, to our customers, and to our taxpayers that TARTA is indeed outperforming from an operational excellence perspective to produce that organizational outcome of excellence. A 50 in Net Promoter Score is putting us in the neighborhood of heading to Disney World. We're not quite there yet. We got work to do to get to Disney, but it allows us to be able to compare against those organizations, private sector and public sector, that are bringing tremendous value. And the commitment that Kim has brought and Laura has brought as Chief Customer Officer to think about the customer experience and to be able to compare benchmarks is so critically important. That creates, Leslie, that ownership that we're able to see, as President Kennedy was talking about, of drivers, of bus washers, to be able to see how their work commits to organizational excellence. I thought it might be interesting to share a story of Rochester here with you. So when I was a young CEO, our customers were telling us that bus cleanliness was important to them. In fact, only 16% of our customers felt that our buses were clean. That is not exactly a recipe for turning the organization around. So we obviously went through a significant effort to really think about how do we go about changing the processes that are in place, but we also needed to create ownership amongst our employees to get them to be invested in organizational success. So we actually enacted a bus doctors onboard campaign. We dressed the folks who clean our buses in medical scrubs, and they proudly posed, and they were on the sides of our buses in advertising and inside our buses. And the level of ownership that these employees took because they were the quote unquote bus doctors was critical to communicating to customers how hard they were working to change bus cleanliness. It didn't happen overnight, but behind changing process, training, and that emotional investment of our employees, we increased our bus cleanliness score by 4 times, taking it from 16% to 64%. Creating that commitment of employee ownership to bring great value. And so finally, I want to talk about this concept of investment return, where the agency communicates how it brings value and the community recognizes that value. Putting the two of those together positions the voters to be able to open their pocketbooks to bring great opportunity for agencies, whether at transit, hospitals, libraries, and the like, parks, to bring even more value to the residents which they serve. It's having a very ambitious communication strategy. So the agency that I led, we could almost announce that if we put lug nuts on the right way, we would have a news conference around it. I'm not sure that the TV cameras and the news media in Rochester could have spent more time. They hadn't been to our property 5 times over the last 15 years. They were there 5 times a week with the things that we were announcing left and right, and worked to really put our agency on as a national profile, both through the work that we were doing, but the value that our residents were able to see. And that value, the communication strategies that we put in place, were so critical in allowing the impressions of the community to make change. We often describe it as it requires great frosting on top, but it also requires great cake. It requires the policy changes as well as the wonderful ability to be able to communicate the value that you're bringing. Putting the both of those together really drives change in the way the community perceives us. So I want to wrap by sharing the story of Rochester. You'll remember how it all began. And so on the left-hand side, we were facing multi-million-dollar deficits. We'd had $1 million swiped from us. We had 16% bus cleanliness scores. And you'll recall how we had defined success. We were going to feed 725 families, somehow figure out how to keep fares stable, and we were going to build ourselves the best damn bus company in the country. We wound up feeding 860 families. We actually reduced fares for our customers while actually reducing our reliance on taxpayer subsidies. We took on-time performance from 76% to the low 90s because the employees, the drivers, owned that. We were able to expand service rather than slash it. And we were able to get our employees to vote for a pay-for-performance program to connect the results of their work to their families' kitchen tables. It was that ownership, the commitment they had to bring greater value. And so we wanted to wrap with sharing this. And you can see some of the organizations that we've had the privilege to work with over the last 10 years. In Jacksonville, the agency that went on to become Transit System of the Year. This past year in Sacramento, the CEO of the Year for APTA. And the chairman of the APTA board, working with each of these organizations along this lens of organizational excellence, operational excellence, and investment excellence. I think for those in TARTA that are listening and those across Toledo, your agency, under the leadership of your new CEO and her management team, has thought through organizational excellence. You've done the components here, the strategic plan, the success outcomes, the performance measurement system will be adopted by the TARTA board just next month. You've thought about operational excellence, an outcomes-driven work plan, eating tomato soup with a spoon to make sure we're doing the right work to be able to deliver great value. The question that remains is investment excellence. Are the communication strategies there? How do we help the community understand the great value that TARTA is bringing and the decisions that the community gets to make in recognizing the efforts the agency has made in regards to organizational excellence and operational excellence? I'm so grateful for having the opportunity to be with you and share some of our work across the country, and specifically the work is doing in Toledo. And Kim, look forward to having some questions and some dialogue with viewers that you've had join us.
Thanks, Mark. And I have to say to everyone who's participated, it doesn't matter how many times I hear Mark speak, I'm always so inspired. And the change he's made by working together through TransPro with transit agencies across the United States, I think it's just so exciting for us here in Toledo and TARTA for what the future might look like. So we do have a few moments for Q&A, and I'll wait for folks, again, as a reminder, if you could type into the Q&A section on the Zoom. Not seeing any. I had a couple prepared. Mark, I'm wondering, could you share with our viewers what are some of the innovative trends you're seeing in transit systems across the country? I'm talking about in terms of service delivery and technology. I'd really like the people here to hear about that.
Yeah, so it's a good question, Kim, that you ask. And I think a couple of things that I might, share there. And I think the work that you have been leading, quite honestly, I would say at the APTA level, is a key component of this, of really helping organizations not view themselves, simply as grandpa's bus company, right? Where you're, simply doing what you've always done, and just complaining that, COVID doesn't allow you, to do it, for more folks. I think the work that, you have been able to bring is such a welcome thought. And I think you've seen that in your Net Promoter Score, right? The fact that you're offering more optionality to your customers, that you're, beginning to think about, how do you think about fares in a different way? How do you think about payment systems in a different way? Are there ways that you can partner with mobility partners like the Ubers and the Lyfts and the others, rather than viewing them as the enemy? And so I think, from my perspective, as one of the folks that is getting older and more gray hair, I look at younger CEOs like you, I think really leading that conversation to think about it in a different way. In regards to your technology question, I'll just be quick on that. I think we're watching agencies no longer view technology as, quote, the solution. They're beginning to view technology as the ability to help them improve processes for customers and internal decision making. That technology in and of itself isn't the answer. Technology allows you to bring greater value and make smarter decisions.
Thank you. So someone was curious, how did Rochester raise money that allowed them to be able to cut fares and reduce the reliance on taxpayer money?
Well, that is a $26 million question. So there's a lot behind it, obviously, a whole bunch of factors. Certainly a big component of it, was beginning to really think about the way that transit is funded, where typically, transit has been viewed as there's two places to get money. You go and put your hand out and ask the taxpayer to give you more, or you tell customers that they have to pay more, that those are sort of the two ways to go about getting dollars. And I think, and Kim, I think you've been, thinking about this specifically, for your community. Are there new ways to introduce revenue streams, right? Are there ways to go beyond simply those two relatively limited choices and begin to think, are there ways for me to partner with school districts in a different way? Could I partner with colleges or hospitals? Could I partner with nursing homes? Are there a number of different ways to think about how we fund the very valuable service that we deliver, rather than simply saying, well, if you just gave me, quote, more money, we'd be able to do more. Or if the customer just paid more, we'd be able to do more. How can we as executive teams really think about it in a different way? To answer the question specifically in Rochester, it took us a while, right? I mean, it didn't happen, overnight, but over a period of time, we were able to introduce new streams of revenue that actually surpassed our farebox revenue. And I'm not going to suggest we made farebox revenue irrelevant. We certainly didn't do that, but it allowed us to drive cost recovery. As most agencies have cost recovery in sort of the 20% range. We were able to take our cost recovery into the mid 40s. And it's thinking about, as you are, solutions in a very, very different way.
Thanks. So a lot of folks are interested in how can community advocates and business partners, how can they help advocate, send the message for more funding for transit? And that I would ask you the question that on a local, state, and national level.
So I think there's two pieces to that. I think it starts with organizational excellence. And I shared that last slide in our prepared remarks of how your board will be considering that organizational excellence next month. If you think about operational excellence, your customers have already recognized you with delivering great value. There's a net promoter score of 50. Do you know how many transit agencies across the country would give their left front tire to have a net promoter score of 50? A lot of them, I can tell you. We work with some. And so I think to those who would want to be advocates, it's telling that story, right? So rather than talking about what's wrong, let's talk about what's right. The agency has aligned around a series of success outcomes. Hopefully the board will endorse them and the management team has a plan to execute. Rather than talking about the 6 customers that might complain, let's talk about the net promoter score of 50 that we have. That's significant, more than nearly double the industry norm. Let's talk about that. That changes the third prong, the investment ROI, such that we're able to get organizations to invest, the community to invest in those first 2 prongs. Let's talk about what we're doing right, rather than focus on what we've done wrong or what we could do more of.
Yes, like with all of the experience you've had in your years, what would you say to an up and coming management team of a transit system that can help?
I think that was a nice way of somebody saying I'm old. I mean, I don't have a cane.
No, not exactly. I don't think exactly. But, just in reflection, what would you tell the next generation, right, of transit professionals about to help them navigate things that you maybe have taken the longer road for you to have to learn? What are some quick advice you could give with regard to running a transit system?
A couple of things. So the first I would say is pick where you want to be great and go be great at it. Recognize by being great, you have to make the decision to be less great at other things. We can't be great at 52 things. Ritz-Carlton is amazing at the quality of their experience for the customer. Walmart is amazing at prices. You can't be amazing at both sides, right? So it's really focusing on where you want to be excellent. I think the second piece that I would offer for new teams is to make sure we measure the outcomes we want to produce rather than the activity. It's not projects that allow us to be successful. It's the outcomes of those projects that allow us to be successful. And the third thing that I would say is communicate, communicate, communicate. Be on offense. So many agencies wind up on the defense, explaining why they can't, defending why something is such. Speaking to the episodic experiences of 4 people who happen to be standing in the room rather than the 4,000 people who aren't in the room but have had a very different experience. Be on offense in our communication.
That's great advice. So one more. People are at times averse to change, particularly fast-paced and constant change. Tell us more about how you convince the staff at the Rochester system to embrace change, please.
Yeah, so that's a complicated question. We could spend another half an hour together, getting to that. I think a couple things. It takes time, right? So, I shared a performance incentive program that our labor union was able to vote for. That took 5 years, right? It doesn't happen, magically. So I would say 3 things to think about there. The first, it requires a management team and a board that is committed to producing a series of outcomes. They need to have clarity of where the end zone is. No employee, I shared the Kennedy story for a reason, that the people that are the custodians are able to take ownership of sweeping the floors better because they believe the vision of sending a man to the moon and back safely. So it's that criticality of knowing what that is. The second piece is tying it to KPIs that matter to the individual. Show me how my work produces those outcomes. And then the third piece, tie it to my performance review, right? Directly connect the results of my work to my performance review. You got my attention now. Do those 3 things. And over time, people's hearts and minds will follow.
All right. Thank you again so much. And I'd like the audience to know we had more than 100 participants tonight. So thank you so much for everyone. There were many questions brought up, and just a reminder, we kind of wanted to focus on Mark's experience and his presentation. So this is being recorded, and also the other questions that were presented will be answered on the TARTA website. So just to address that. Mark, can't thank you enough for taking the time to share your career journey. Your enthusiasm is unbelievable, and your passion for public transportation. We're so fortunate to be partnering with you and your team as we reinvent our own business model, set our strategic vision, and identify new success outcomes at TARTA. Thank you so much for being with us.
Kim, thanks for having me, and congratulations on your success. And on behalf of the industry, thank you for the leadership that you're bringing to your organization. But the industry as a greater whole, we need the younger generation like yours to drive that change. So on behalf of the industry, thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to introduce Peter Voorhees, who's been assisting TARTA with our scheduling and planning functions and will provide an update on the spring 21 schedule. Peter?
Thanks very much, Kim. And thank you, Mark, for that inspiring presentation earlier. Okay, well, good evening, friends. Would like to review with you some proposed service changes that TARTA is proposing very soon, planning for these to roll out next month. And it's really a pretty dramatic change compared to what's operating today, and would love to give you a little preview here. And what you're going to see represents TARTA's ongoing response to the pandemic. And, you know, TARTA is making every effort to connect those essential workers to on-site jobs and residents to needed services. And just a little bit of background on that. TARTA does continue to provide essential trips only. We'd love to get to a position where everybody's encouraged to come and ride all the time again, but for now it is continuing to be essential trips only. And due to the pandemic, TARTA does have reduced operations. Buses are operating every 90 minutes currently from the hub downtown, and capacity on the buses is limited for social distancing. No more than 10 riders per large bus and no more than 5 riders per the smaller vehicles. And when a bus pulls up, if 10 passengers get on and there's still a demand for more passengers to board, well, there are other buses sitting around the corner. We refer to those as shadow buses. And a shadow bus can be called in immediately to gather those additional passengers. And that has been serving the system well during the pandemic, you know, for these limited operations. But one thing I want to note here is that the different routes are not equal in that there's more demand on some routes than on others. And yet they're all operating at the same frequency, right? So exploring how to take some of those shadow buses that are waiting to provide more service and are needed for some of these runs and go ahead and put them into regular service and start operating more service where there's more demand. Okay, so the goal here is to put those into service on the busier routes. Transition and go ahead. Let's switch to the next slide here. The goal is to transition from service every 90 minutes to service every 30 minutes on some of these higher demand corridors. And we refer to this new level of service during the pandemic as core service. So wherever we are talking about core service, we're providing service every 30 minutes. And beyond the core areas, there are some areas within the current, system operation and some beyond the current fixed route operation that are important places to serve during the pandemic. We're thinking primarily about hospitals, but there are other job centers and service areas that, you know, if it's possible to serve that's a great thing to be able to do. And, now that we're in this phase of looking to get as many people vaccinated as possible, having better connections from communities out to hospitals is more critical than it ever has been throughout the pandemic here. And just a couple other notes. Saturday service, we're not proposing any changes to Saturday service at this point, taking on, one thing at a time here. Also, no proposed changes to TARPs and caller ride services at this point. And finally, everything that we're going to be presenting today is really on a trial basis. It's still responding to the emergency situation, and to be able to establish this long term and even grow from it is really going to be subject to available funding. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about some of these specific changes, and then we're going to jump right to a map. I know I like to see things on a map. I expect that others, it's going to be easier also, so I'll hit these very quickly. Route 2 Monroe, core service as far as Toledo Hospital and Franklin Park Mall. And beyond that, hourly service, and we're looking to extend that service all the way out to Flower Hospital in Sylvania, hitting ProMedica urgent care and interim stops. Route 5 on Dorr Street, looking to actually consolidate that service downtown on Monroe to provide more frequent service on Monroe, but also core service out to the University of Toledo, and beyond that, extend even beyond where it goes today and connect that service up to Flower Hospital in Sylvania. East Toledo. Today, there's a single route that operates every 90 minutes and kind of does this circular pattern around East Toledo. Historically, it was two different routes, and we're proposing going back to those routes. And where they come together, and in downtown East Toledo, looking to consolidate that a little bit more, and where they cross the river and through downtown, operate every 30 minutes there. So we're basically extending core service to the heart of East Toledo. And let's see, two more routes. 19, Cherry and Sylvania. Core service all the way there, all the way out to Franklin Park Mall, and that corridor does serve Mercy Health St. Vincent Medical Center, and also Franklin Park Mall, and there are other clinics, St. Anne's and Toledo Clinic are on the way there. And finally, Route 31. Route 31 travels on Broadway. It goes right by the zoo. The most wonderful way to go to the zoo, for those who have experienced it, is from the gate on Broadway. We're planning to go right past the zoo there, 30-minute service out to the University of Toledo Health Sciences campus. And beyond that, hourly service, pretty much, a little bit beyond the extent of where it goes today. It goes a little bit past Southwick today, and that's where the new Amazon office facility is. Extend beyond. Get into Maumee, serve St. Luke's Hospital there, and some major employers in a loop on the way back from Maumee. Also serves the Meyer store in Maumee. So let's go to the map. We can see it here. The bold lines are that core service that we've talked about. So that's service every 30 minutes. The next level of thickness lines, that's the hourly service, still better than the 90-minute service that's being operated today, and it will be coordinated. So, for example, if you're trying to get to Flower Hospital, every lineup will have a bus that's going as far as Flower Hospital in Sylvania. And we've got a few thinner lines than that. Weren't able to address those in this phase of planning, but you can see it's starting to emerge as something that looks more like a subway network and clear focus on those routes that are most deserving of more service and have the most demand. So with that, next steps, we're looking to complete the road testing here in the coming few weeks. Look for updates on the TARTA website and in social media. And we are looking to roll out these changes very soon. The plan here is for these new services to go into effect in the middle of March. So we're about a month away. That's it for the service update. And with that, I will pass it back to Laura.
Peter, thank you for that informative presentation. Well, as we wrap up tonight's program, please be sure to take our post-event survey that will be available when you leave the forum. And for those of you calling in, you're going to receive that survey by email. Your feedback is so important to us. It helps us to continue providing valuable events and programs for the community to learn more about public transit in TARTA. This was our second community forum, and we really do anticipate doing more this year. As you can see, we also want to thank our partners who were here with us to support and make all the events of Ohio Loves Transit Week possible. Actually, on Friday and Saturday, we're doing customer appreciation events for TARPs and our TARTA customers down at the Downtown Transit Hub. And all of these wonderful partners have helped us along the way. And as we and we want to thank Mark Aesch again for his engaging and informative keynote presentation. We plan to have that recorded and available on the TARTA website in the coming week at tarta.com. I know I want to watch it again, so please go visit us, watch it again, and share it with others. And finally, thank you to all of our forum attendees for joining us this evening. We really appreciate this very large turnout. It's fantastic. And we encourage you to stay engaged with TARTA. With your involvement and support, we'll not just be talking about making and building great, innovative public transit in the Toledo region, we can actually make it happen. Good night.